Hello, this is Niswander, Dan Nowman Niswander. You're watching the Nowman Show, and I'm here with Larry Alger, who's a friend of mine now living in the state of Washington. Larry, how are you doing, man?
I'm doing well, man, and really liking the move that I made a couple of years ago up here to Washington. Dan and I actually met originally in Los Angeles in 2011 at the Occupy LA.
Occupy Wall Street. Yeah, we can actually even we should even talk about that some because it's the ninth anniversary as at the time we're recording this.
Yeah,
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 so
that's right.
it's been a while. And there's so much to catch up on and talk about, stuff that you don't hear in the mainstream media, and even sometimes from our dear lefty podcasters.
Yeah, that's for
So
sure.
we need to get into some of that discussion as well. So
Well, I
first
want
of
to
all,
thank
Larry,
you for
tell us.
having
Oh,
me on,
absolutely,
and
my pleasure.
again, that to slingshot off of Occupy. That's how I fell originally into the rabbit hole.
Oh,
And at that point in time, I was working with a guy who had a website called wall street swindlers.com, and
oh,
that's
really?
gone. That's gone, and that's how I got into it.
Oh,
And
wow.
he said, "Hey, let's go down and check it out and see if you can generate something for my website." Right?
Yeah.
And damn, I got into that rabbit hole, and I've never been able to get out of it since. As a matter of fact, Dave DeGraw was down there.
That's right.
Yep.
That's right. It's funny. That's just kind of a side story, but before we get into that, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself first, and then we'll get
Okay.
into
All right.
Occupy.
So yeah, Occupy opened up a whole new world that I never really knew, and that led me into um, more political activism. And in 15, when Bernie announced, I went back to my buddy and said, "Hey, I want to do a little reporting. Give me another press pass." So he did. And I wound up on the campaign trail, and we wound up actually creating justicenewsnetwork.com because I was doing a lot of reporting off the trail, and I wound up actually shooting video in San Diego of the whited out Bernie votes, which most people probably never heard of.
Right, exactly.
That story really got buried, but they were whiting out Bernie Sanders votes in San Diego County at the direction of the Democratic Party because, oh, there weren't signatures didn't match, or a good one is University of California, San Diego is a big school, and all of the resident students there, if they had on their voter registration, if they had the school address and they didn't put the room in on their return,
Hmm.
for their ballot,
Hmm.
it got disallowed.
Oh, wow.
And so it was just one of the myriad of ways they were cheating, and cheating Bernie, right, and the Byrne family. And that was one of the things why they whited out the Bernie votes for those students. That vote didn't count for because they didn't put on the room number. Like in New York when the Lee Camp reported on, uh, they they wiped out 127,000 uh, voters off of Brooklyn.
At least, yeah. I know it was in the six figures. Yep.
Yep.
And
And
they
so
all were, trackable to Bernie Sanders. I don't know specifically how they do that, but and I heard all kinds of stories, going across the country, different kinds of scenarios. I mean, everything from I was following one story one day in real time that was happening at some precinct in, I don't know, Iowa or Middle America, in Missouri or somewhere in there, that part of the country, and there was somebody apparently taking ballots out of a precinct to their car, kind of sneaking out envelopes, manila envelopes or whatever, little bits at a time. And they would go out to the car to get cupcakes for the workers, things like that, or bring, like they were going out to their car to get something when in fact they were taking.
Yeah, I'll be right back.
Yeah. And somebody started thinking something suspicious was going on and followed them out one time, and sure enough, caught them red-handed. There were ballots in those manila envelopes that were for Bernie. And
Ballot bandits.
it basically said, so I'm just going to bring in some more food, for the workers, because she was what they call the precinct manager, the one in charge.
Yeah.
So what ended up happening is I was following the story in real time. Like they were literally, people were putting Facebook posts up while I was doing something else, my usual, I'm what do you call it? Multitasking. And what eventually ended up happening is that they exposed it in the precinct to all the workers there, because some were for this was a person, by the way, that was voting a Hillary supporter.
Sure.
And so they ended up giving the responsibility of managing the precinct to a Bernie supporter. And even other Hillary supporters voted in favor of that because of what happened.
Yeah.
And that's just one
story
in one precinct in the country.
Iowa 16, that's where she won 6 out of 6 coin flips.
Mm-hmm.
And
they're the coin tosses.
They actually got one on video, on cell phone video, that was totally bogus.
Mm-hmm.
That they gave it to Hillary, but the Bernie crew had won.
And the vast majority of the, as they were called, irregularities, turned out to be in favor of Hillary Clinton. Yeah. Sure. Irregularities and shenanigans, because you couldn't prove supposedly any rigging was going on, but the vast majority of them ended up benefiting Clinton. So it was...
That, Dan, is really became my focus of election integrity. And that's my focus today is, why do we even bother talking about candidates if we don't have election integrity?
Right. Why do we call ourselves a democracy when we obviously don't even have democracy and the one thing where democracy is supposed to still be in?
Yep.
Or as Richard Wolff calls it, we have the right for universal suffrage, but we don't have it in reality.
No, we just suffer.
And it's like the Devo, the music group, has this album, this song called Freedom of Choice. You have freedom of choice, but you don't want it. Basically what that song is about. Yeah. And they were saying that back in the late 70s, early 80s. So, this is nothing new, unfortunately. It's just we're seeing history repeat itself even in recent times, but the denial is still very thick. And I really don't even like talking about electoral politics that much, because I'm so tired of seeing the same things over and over again, the same scenarios playing themselves out, the same denial stories of people. Well, no, we have to do this first and then we'll do this. And it's like, well, no, you can, let's say, you can focus on the electoral, since we do have an election coming up or whatever, but that shouldn't stop you from learning more about, let's say, Medicare For All, if you don't know, or learning more about the Green New Deal. That's not just the Democratic Party or Bernie or AOC's version. Learn about the original one, or to learn about Andrew Yang's basic income, or even that the history of that. You can still take a little bit of your time and understand these things while you're also focused on your electoral politics. But I can't tell you how many times I've heard from people, but no, Dan, we can't do that. We gotta have this outcome or that outcome. And I'm like, and most of it is, anti-Trump, as far as that goes.
Of course, these days. But that's the big problem, Dan, is that until we straighten out election integrity, like Greg Palast, Greg, right? Mm-hmm. Has been working for really hard over the last 4 years and made some incredible breakthroughs.
Well, he started his work, 20 years ago, really?
Yeah.
At least. So he's done incredible work.
Oh yeah, but that's where I met Greg and uh, got to know him a bit. Was 16 on the campaign trail. I ran into
Mm-hmm.
him at KPFK.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Sometimes you click with people, and Greg's one of my heroes.
Yeah, he's great. I met him at a charity event on the west side of LA and talked to him for a bit.
Yeah,
And I learned more of his story then,
right.
you know.
And that's gregpalast.com, GregPalast.com. And if you want to find out about the ballot bandits, as he calls it, follow his work.
And doesn't he have a documentary called "The Best Democracy Money Can Buy" or something like that?
Right. That was the last cycle. This cycle, it's how Trump stole 2020.
Ah,
That's his new work, which is updated, but it's basically the same old crap.
same kind of idea,
As Greg
you know.
as Greg said, you know, the billionaires, the oligarchs, they don't bet on one horse or the other. They try to own the whole damn racetrack,
That's right.
and
That's right.
that's what that's about. And until we straighten that out, they're going to deny us universal health care,
Yeah.
UBI. Um,
Well, I have a question. I mean, I'll pose it to you, but I'm really posing it to everybody out there watching. Um, what do you think that this is true? Do you think that the oligarchy, in other words, oligarchy is basically uh, it's people who are rich, who own big corporations, and they essentially make the most important decisions of our government through one form or another, um, through money in politics, through lobbying, etc. Do you think the oligarchs are more afraid of the general public or the masses of people than some of the people in the masses are afraid of another 4 years of Trump or a Joe Biden presidency?
yeah, the oligarchs, a lot of it has to do with hubris and their sense of entitlement.
Mm-hmm.
We, like our friend, departed friend George Carlin said,
Mm-hmm.
they own you. They're the owners of this country,
That's right.
and that really sums it up. That's how they feel.
Mm-hmm.
This is our place, and you eaters are just existing in it, and you know, and their cops are the watchdogs, and that's why we have a police culture that makes police entitled to feel entitled to be able to gun down just about anybody in the street.
Mm-hmm.
And that's finally coming around again. Um, I grew up in LA in the '60s, and the movement, so to speak, toward our rights and centered around the Vietnam War and stopping the Vietnam War,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and that's what pulled people together. But they worked on splitting us up, divide and conquer, after they saw what the peaceful coming together could do, and that stopped the Vietnam War at that point.
Yeah, absolutely. Change on a large scale always happens from the bottom up. And that's another thing that we shouldn't be surprised about, even when um, Bernie Sanders, says he's supporting Joe Biden and Kamala Harris
Yeah,
after, how he was treated, you know, how the primaries were basically in one way or another. I don't like to limit the word rigged. I think jimmied, arranged. I don't know what the right word would be.
stolen
Stolen, yeah.
from us.
From the people, basically what the people wanted. So, um, even he said, at one town hall meeting with Chris Hayes, MSNBC, when somebody asked him, about this very question. He said, well, you shouldn't listen to what I say. You should do what you think and what you feel.
Yeah,
And
that's what
not
Bernie
do
said
what
in
I say. He
16.
even said it himself. So
Yeah, and that's exactly what Bernie said in 16 in a little different context. If I ever tell you how to vote, who to vote for, don't listen to me. That's
right.
your choice.
That was at the town hall with Chris Hayes and
Yeah,
MSNBC.
right.
Yeah, and I always refer people to that when they, start, saying, why has he betrayed us and blah 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 blah. Well, you have to take part of that ownership too, because he told you not to listen to him.
Absolutely.
And which gets me to this next point. There's a congressman, I believe it's Michigan. He sounds like, he says he's libertarian. I think he's like Howie. He's more like he's maybe not quite as left.
And that's Howie Hawkins of the Green Party.
Howie Hawkins of the Green Party, who's a presidential candidate for the Green Party in 2020. And he is which we'd call a liberal libertarian. In other words, more of a lefty libertarian,
Yeah,
which do
lefty
exist. I met people like that at Occupy Wall Street or Occupy Los Angeles. This guy is probably more of a centrist libertarian, more apt to caucus with, the left than with the right. But he understands, the whole libertarian kind of idea. And he got into Congress really young. His parents were immigrants, and I think he might have been an immigrant too. His name is Justice Amash, and so he's been in for 10 years. And he's ending, just like Tulsi Gabbard. He said, "That's it. I'm not going to do this anymore." So he went on Andrew Yang's podcast to talk about what he's going to do once he's finished in January, and he's going to do a similar kind of thing as what he did with Andrew Yang. He's going to go around to podcasts and talk to people about his 10 years in the Congress. He's just going to be completely right out in the open about it. And he didn't even refer to it as political theater. He referred to it as these people in Congress, for the most part, not every single one, but for the most part, they know they're going in to be entertainers. He just said it quite matter-of-factly, right? Nothing, and Andrew Yang said later, all the things he was talking about didn't surprise him, but still there's that look on, the face, of Andrew Yang, like,
yeah.
And that's how I was looking at the screen too, like, I'm not surprised, but, it's one thing after another. He said the reason why important initiatives don't get passed is because they're not intended to. They only pass things that have to pass because they're too controversial or they're no threat to the establishment, so just let them pass kind of thing. And if you notice with the Comey approval, right, that was literally on the Democrat side. It was just Nancy Pelosi, essentially. Nobody else really had any input in that. And he pointed out how that's what happens. You know why nothing happens with health care on the Democratic side or on the Senate, on the House side? Nancy Pelosi. And to be fair, he said,
it's like renting in California.
It's the same thing. If that would have been a Republican, that would have been the person making the decision for the entire legislative branch, right? Mm-hmm. That's it. And yet people think this is democracy even in that way, and it's not. Plus, the political theater is not just a term, of Nancy Pelosi tearing up a speech, at the State of the Union address. That's deliberately produced, maybe even directed behind the scenes entertainment, like a reality show would be, like Survivor or something like that. Like, okay, we're going to pretend that this is really a natural thing happening. You have this emotional reaction to Donald Trump's State of the Union speech. So what you're going to do is you're going to hold it up and you're going to just rip it up on TV while millions of people are watching. Because the reality of the situation was at that time she was, again, making the decisions, approving every single one of Trump's judge appointments. But she had on TV to create entertainment, like, I am opposing him because I'm tearing up his State of the Union
Absolutely.
speech.
You ever see that
It's disgusting.
that old Facebook series called The Swamp?
No, I've never seen that.
Okay. There was 5 different episodes, and it was totally professionally produced, and they followed around Thomas Massey and 4 or 5 other congressmen, Republican congressmen, who were all laying out the reality. The staffers write the laws. It's the committee chairmen that run the place. You can think that you're the elected representative, but they tell you what to do, and it's an amazing. I've got it. It's funny. I downloaded it and I edited them all together. It's called The Swamp, and it wasn't a week later that it disappeared off of Facebook. And so I've got them all together, and what I'll do is I'll post that on justicenewsnetwork.com. Or actually on my Facebook page, Justice News Facebook page and Larry's Facebook page. And it's called The Swamp, and everybody should see it. Because until we get that through, you and I totally agree about universal health care.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Whether you call it Medicare for All or whatever, universal health care. Now, I'm a vet, and for 3 decades, I've had my health care from the VA. And that's what Americans of any stripe and any age need, is that kind of health care.
How long has the VA existed in the health care plan for the veterans?
The first what's the word I'm looking for? The first phase, right, was actually by Abraham Lincoln.
Oh, wow.
To take care of Civil War vets. So it's been
a long time.
And of course it's morphed and changed and grown. And the healthcare is good. There are, like anywhere, there are hospitals that are lucky enough to be better than others because of the staff, But bottom line is, what's really happened, and it didn't make any difference whether it was Bush, Obama, or Trump, the percentage of staffing at the VA has come down, where they just didn't hire new people. Budget, this and that. It's like 52, 54% average job fills. There's almost everybody's trying to do 2 jobs, or for every one person who's working there, there's a job that's unfilled, and that really causes problems. It makes it really harder. And since COVID, everything's gone to hell in the handbasket, healthcare wise, all over the place. But it's really hurt the VA. And Trump, compared to what he says, he has issued a lot of executive orders that have made it very burdensome to the VA. One of the things he did recently is in 2019 they started, they had an executive order that wound up booting out the union. The unions used to have offices where they could help the membership at every VA, big VA facility. Mm-hmm. Those are gone. They booted them out. So, union busting, a la Reagan, right?
That's right.
But that's what America needs, is a universal health care plan where you walk in and you get good quality health care, and you're not looking at insulin at what, $300 a shot or whatever stupid it is. And that's one of the biggest things that I want to see that.
Well, I think that you know, one of the things that concerns me is that why there aren't visibly more angry people. I mean, angry. And I don't mean violently angry, I just mean angry. Why there aren't more people who are angry about the common sense fact that, of course, before COVID, we had no universal health care plan in place, right?
Right.
And no serious discussion really amongst the establishment about doing anything about that.
Except
We,
no.
then we have a pandemic that happens, and guess what? We still have no serious discussion amongst the establishment about what can be done to get everybody health care. To me, that in of itself, and there are many other failures of the system, many other, and we can get into those if we have to. But that in itself should be the most fundamental, massive proof of the failure of our system. When there's a pandemic and we cannot get everybody health care, and yet at the same time, in March, trillions of dollars, some probably 5 trillion, whatever it might be, I've heard up to 10 if you include the insurance part of that, that would come from our tax dollars. But I've heard something like 5 trillion, let's say, that was created as fiat money of the Federal Reserve Bank. 5 trillion essentially going to what's called essential businesses, be multimillionaires and billionaires, really, for the most part, deciding where that money goes. At their discretion. It was not transparent. It was done very quickly in a matter of days at a time when they were telling us, okay, we have a pandemic, you have to go home because we got to quarantine people to figure out what we got to do here. So it was all done very quickly. That kind of process took months in 2008, 2009 when it was done then, to bail out the banks, etc. This same process was done in days, right? And little by little, we find out, oh, Shake Shack got this amount, or Amazon got this amount, or Trump's
the Lakers got $4 million.
Right.
So little by back, but
right. Little. I mean, these are considered essential businesses, for survival. So as more and more of this information comes out, you would think it would become more clear to people. And yet they're telling you, and have been telling you for a long time, we don't have the money. How are you going to pay for health care? How are you going to pay for this free education? Bernie talks about how you can pay for this and that and the other thing. But somehow the money to multimillionaires and billionaires, like that.
That's right. The airlines, the
cruise business. Yeah, exactly.
No, it's crazy. It really is in.
And this should be proof in itself right here. Again, and yet that being said, no universal health care plan. We have one that could be implemented, which is Medicare for All. It doesn't have to be that, but we already have the Medicare system. It would make sense. We know how it works. Like you said, it's a good system. It's not perfect, but no system is perfect. Any Canadian you talk to, any German you talk to, or Swiss, or whatever, Norwegian, they will all tell you, no, it's not perfect, but we have everybody covered, and we're constantly working on making it better. That's proof. That's reality. And anybody in this country, it's usually going to be somebody who's been propagandized, or they work for an insurance company. They're always going to give you this line. And I had a conversation with somebody recently about this I think they got laid off from an insurance company, actually, and they're still defending the insurance company healthcare system. They were basically talking about how they're working on getting the costs down, or I can't even remember it seemed like such a lame defense.
We're making it affordable.
Affordable for people that don't have to worry about them because they have Social Security or they already have pensions from working decades.
Well, Dan,
they don't have to worry.
Doing the math on the original CARES Act, right? If you take it at face value, 2.3 trillion. Okay.
I heard it was up to 5. So
but that's with leveraging but I mean the CARES Act, the first one passed for 2.3 trillion. Now, if you took that and divided it by 100 million households, every household would have got 23,000 and change. Would that have changed everything? Would that have kept the economy afloat? Well, Dan, yeah, that's what they did in Germany and in the Scandinavian countries. Is they helped the people, which put the money into the economy and kept everything afloat. And small businesses didn't close their doors.
That's right, and not only that, they have since the job guarantee thing, and of course, they already had in Germany, for instance, they already had healthcare, so that was not that they didn't have to. That was already organized. That was already done. So then they had a job guarantee thing, so that the businesses and the workers didn't have to worry. You're not going to lose your employees. You're not going to lose your job, and you can go home, and we got to figure out what to do with this COVID thing. So when those funds ran out, or maybe they're still going, I don't even know. They also implemented a basic income to about a year from now, 2021, in effect.
Yeah.
So they don't want people in the streets, shutting down the economy, because that's what they would do in Europe. So and then they even more so, they don't want people stressing out, and feeling desperation.
Unless you're France.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
they have the worst example probably, but theirs is still better than ours
Yeah.
overall here in the U.S. So, and what have we done in the U.S.? Nothing. And what has the general
Now
public
wait a
done?
minute. I gotta get in here. Since COVID hit, there's been 30 million people unemployed, which means millions of people lost their health insurance along with that. And you don't hear anything, you really don't hear anything out of the mainstream media about 30 million people being unemployed and maybe 10 million families losing their health insurance. Those poor people, I mean, I'm really fortunate. The VA underwent some real stress, as healthcare did. And it took me, and I know the system real well, it took me 3 months to get an MRI. This past spring. My primary ordered it in April, and I didn't get it until June.
Wow.
They kept kicking it back and kicking it back as non-essential. And he had ordered it 4 times, and 3 of the 4 times it was marked essential because I have a lot of pre-existing conditions.
Mm.
And I'm just grateful to be here. My attitude is gratitude. But that's the kind of healthcare system we need.
I
So
know.
that you call up or you go in and they take care of you. And that's the way it is around the world. You know that.
And well, there's another thing too with it. As far as MRI machines, which is interesting, is that when you said that it took you like 2 to 3 months.
3 months.
The MRI machine, from my understanding, is made by a company in the United States. So if people, what is that?
GE, most of them.
GE makes most of them,
Yeah.
and so they're probably going to have back orders, and it's my understanding that most of the back orders are going to go to U.S. owned medical companies. So if there are, let's say, health organizations or medical organizations in Canada that want an MRI machine, well, they're not number one on the priority list.
Well, no, and it wasn't about the machinery.
Well, what I'm saying is,
machinery.
right?
It's people have been working from home. The hospitals have been ghost towns as far as personnel and the areas that haven't been facing the COVID. The elective stuff and the usual healthcare needs have been shoved way in the background.
Mm-hmm.
And not prioritized as non-essential because COVID. But I'll tell you, man, it was really scary. It was really scary. And I feel sorry for a lot of the vets who really don't know their way around, who I see in the halls of the VA, or standing there at the lines, who are screaming at the people behind the desk, and there's a lot of PTSD.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
You know,
Oh yeah.
and these poor people behind the screens, they're just trying to do their job. You know, everybody really does try to do the best job, in my experience in 30 odd years. So, you know, we need universal health care. We
Absolutely.
just
And
need it.
basically, Medicare is that. So it could very easily. That's why they talk about Medicare for all, because it could be easily
You know,
transitioned into that, right?
The way the Medicare deal is set up, and you know, and I'm 68, okay, and my significant other just retired and went from being in healthcare, a 38-year nurse, and she was a charge nurse, ICU, you know, for 38 years she worked her way in that position. And she's transitioning to Medicare, and they do not make it easy. It's just amazing. 38-year charge nurse, right? Medicare, there's so many different possibilities, and the information that you get, you don't know whether it's for real or what, especially if you're talking about United Healthcare or Humana, or you know, and they're all vying for get into our system. And you know what, man? It's still, for her, it's still $300 a month to get everything covered, and that ain't like the VA system.
Well,
So
that is that 100% government funding though. Are there private companies that are involved in
yes,
that? Yeah. Well, that's
all the
why.
ones that are the supplementals,
Right.
right? You know, they're all
That's what I
private.
thought. That's where most of the problems are. People will again. Usually, if you hear establishment people say that this is the problem and we have to talk about it, we have to deal with it, and that's why, to me, that's why I always tell people, like, don't take things at face value, because it's just the fact that things cost more in the private sector in general. Whether it doesn't matter what you're talking about, because the reason why it's private sector, it's just like the same reason we call our system free market. They're required to make a profit, which means maximum profit. So
That's
you
right.
have, in the business sense, you have a cost, right? Your basic cost for what it, what it would cost for your materials and to pay your employees and all that kind of stuff, whatever. But on top of that, you have to have a profit margin. So just by its very nature, if it's a private function, a private company, it's going to cost more because of those requirements. If the priority is on being a public service, let's say, of some kind or another, the funding comes from what people associate with government taxation programs. That's where the funding comes from. So you don't have to concern yourself with what the private sector, the free market,
There's
calls
no
profit.
stockholder interest to be considered.
Right. In other words, that's when you talk about the middleman, that's your middleman that
Yep.
you don't really need, right? Are those stockholders, the rich people, the people that actually um, don't contribute to the business itself other than just make money off of it. So that's why the private sector costs more money, because you have to pay for these people, and for basically providing no real substance to what it is that you're doing with your product or your service. They're just making money off of it.
And the
Um,
stock buyback scams,
right.
blah, blah, blah.
And when you talk about the employee stock option programs, or just even the 401k plan, it's a very very minute part that we all play in that process. It's always the bigger players that are getting by far the advantages, which is one of the reasons why we have such great income and wealth inequality.
Inequality, yeah.
Because income is based on an annual basis. Wealth is overall accumulation. So I was really glad when people like David DeGraw from Occupy Wall Street clarified the distinction between those two things. There was so much that I learned also. The Occupy Wall Street, Occupy Los Angeles thing that was going on in the fall of 2011. But that was one of them. That it's not the same thing. Income and wealth are not the same, and
Yep.
yet they are. The inequality is created the same way.
Yeah.
So people have to understand the distinction. Like, if you start with the premise, let's say, this is what I always challenge people who are, they support or they stand up for the private healthcare system, the for-profit companies. And I say, what do you think the most important thing is? I think where Obamacare initially failed was, instead of saying, how are we realistically going to get everyone covered? Their premise was, and it's the same premise now, really, let's get millions more covered. Or now they're saying, let's not allow whatever it is, 8 million people to lose their coverage, right? So let's get millions more people covered. And my thinking is, the flaw in that right there is like, no, you need to start with the premise of getting everyone covered.
Everybody.
Period.
Yeah. Don't put a
Period.
number on it.
Period.
How much is it? How many is everybody?
That's
not bad.
300 and some million people, whatever. Everybody.
Everybody.
But see, then that's why they bring in this racism and all this kind of stuff. Like, well, the immigrants.
Divide and conquer, dear.
Because, well, they don't deserve it. Like, why? They don't deserve to be a human being? Is that what you're saying? I mean, that's how fundamental this is. That's why I feel very strongly, we said this off camera, I said this earlier, that, to me, really, all this human-made technology, everything that's being done on the surface, when it boils right down to it, it really is about compassion and caring for each other. And if you can't do that, then you have a serious mental issue. You need to get counseling, I think, personally.
Yep. Empathy. You got to have empathy.
That's right. That's right.
And you know what? You have to recognize that greed is our enemy. How many yachts can you water ski behind?
Mm-hmm.
Right? That's they said in Wall Street, right, Gordon?
Gordon,
hey, we're coming up on an hour.
We're coming up on an hour, aren't we?
We are coming up on an hour.
Well, let's continue, and we can wrap it up, maybe on some fun stuff. But I wanted to also mention that I think short-term solutions, and I do this all the time on the show.
Sure.
Things are like, Medicare for All. Basic income now I think it's becoming apparent to more and more people that's going to have to be implemented for a while. UBI.
Well, I'm on Social Security. Okay, so I understand that concept real well.
Absolutely. Yeah. And just imagine that now it's a need that goes beyond the people over 65 or whatever, retired people. And even that should be doubled, as Bernie Sanders said, it should be doubled. And I get confirmation of that all the time. I won't say how from senior citizens, but I get confirmation that they agree with me pretty much 100%. Oh, I would say 100% that Social Security ought to be doubled.
Well, I exist on $900 a month. Because I had to take it early, because in 15 and 16, I was in chemo. And so I had to take early Social Security because I had no other option. And so it was like a pittance, the minimum, $750, right? But
can you switch it
early?
Can you switch it, or once you commit, that's it? You can't switch it?
They don't give you, when you hit 65, they don't, which I think is what it should be. When you hit 65 or 67, it should come up to the level that it would have been when you first took it, if you had not retired early. But and nobody's listening to that either. That's just one other little donut hole in the system that needs to be addressed.
And isn't that the truth? But we have to deal with the short-term solutions first before we can get to the long-term, which is why I always would talk about worker co-ops, but I think that we have to talk about it all, because once we get to that point where I think we are going to see this current system collapse, we're going to have to transition into something else. And this is why I think there's the demonization of socialism, because, and I learned this from Professor Richard Wolff, that socialism is different things that people don't think about as a theoretical analysis. And at the time that it was first used, it was seen as kind of there's two different things that you don't hear about, right, in the average person. Number one of the reasons why you don't hear about Marxism all that much is that Karl Marx's critique of capitalism was based on it malfunctioning like it's doing,
Yeah.
and that you need to have something that allows you a transition to the next system that will be better than that. So that's why one of the reasons why people came up with
Evolution,
socialism. They came up with the word socialism. That's how they. And the other thing was in Russia, um, they they came up with socialism there because at the time people don't realize this. Capitalism was coming of age, but they were also the last, you could say, civilization that was still feudal, right? They had the Romanov family, and they were a bunch of wacko psychos,
Well, that's China.
you know, and they were the last, what we would now call, a feudal system. Plus, the capitalists were coming into Russia, and so the socialists they said, well, we need something as critics of both systems. We don't want either one of those systems, so they call themselves socialists. See, so there's different views of this. Plus, we know our view of, tax funded governmental administrative programs is socialism. There's so many different ways of looking at this. In other words, it's obviously anything that's not 100% free market private. That's why they demonize it, because anything that's not that, they demonize. So that's why they just say, hey, communism, socialism doesn't work, it's evil, because it's not part of how they operate. That's all. That's the only reason why that's happened. And once the average American puts two and two together and realizes, look, you even have social security. It's in a system that technically has little or nothing to do with the private sector and how it's administrated,
Correct.
right? That's why it's social security. So technically, it's a form of socialism because it's not part of the private sector. Our U.S. military is now they kind of hide things with the private-public partnership, like Eisenhower was talking about with the military-industrial complex.
Right,
That's really
yeah.
what he was talking about.
Yep.
Is that the private and the public are going to start joining together, and it's going to start getting confusing. That's one of the things he was really alluding to, which is exactly what's happened. People need to understand what the real definitions are, and the more I learn, the more I realize, oh my God, there's so much ignorance in this country. There's so much that's been left out of our history books.
And the curtains are thick and tall, Dan. That's not by accident.
Not at all.
Control the narrative, and you control the world.
That's right.
That's what we're fighting.
And it's how, and the left, shall you say, is where most of the solutions always come from. And we have a recent example of the New Deal, and everybody knows that. See, that's one of the things that the establishment's afraid of, because they're hoping that the vast majority, I think, of Americans forget about that recent part of their history. You know what I mean? Because all those ideas, every single one of them, came from what you technically would now call left politics.
That's progressive.
Right, progressive, exactly.
Either you're progressive or you're recessive, or you're standing marking time in the same spot. I mean, those are the three options.
And that's why anything that has to do with progress. I mean, even some of the great work that LBJ did, as much of a jerk as he was, anything that actually comes from the left, that the private sector does not want to promote that. They don't want people thinking about it. They'll even go so far as demonize it, and it'll just and fascism will just get worse until people wake up.
Absolutely.
And that's what people need to understand is that, Trump is a neo-fascist. He's a minor form. Pence is he's really scary.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And people need to, in my view, get educated about history, and learn from what gets demonized by the establishment rather than just going along with the narrative, because you'll regret that you did that, if you don't start learning it now. When are you going to start learning?
And you won't, and they work really hard to keep the the wool pulled over the eyes. They really do.
That's right. That's why George Carlin made a decision. Kelly, his daughter, told me that he made a decision at some point that he was going to separate himself from the human species, and so he turned it into a comedy routine and an artistic decision, even though it came from his heart, right? Because
Oscar Wilde, you know
yeah.
what Oscar Wilde said?
But repeat that.
Okay, Oscar Wilde said, and this was what in
Victorian era.
1890s, yeah, 1890s.
Mm-hmm.
If you're going to tell the people the truth, you've got to make them laugh, or they'll kill you.
That's right. That's very true. George Carlin took that to heart.
And he did it probably better than anybody else.
I know, and he literally turned his comedy into commentary of the freak show, and sitting back and just kind of observing things and making commentary about it, and that's how he ended his career, basically, based on decisions that he came to when he started realizing that the wealth and income inequalities increasing, we're destroying the planet environment.
The owners.
Yeah.
The owners of this country. They own all the land, the important land. They own all the judges and the cops. And
got them in their back pockets, as he said.
Right? I mean, and what's changed?
Well, at some point,
you know what's changed?
Something has to change.
You know what's changed? See this?
Yeah.
People have got that on the street now, and George Floyd gets out there. The guy in Wisconsin that got shot, gunned down in front of his house. Okay, this has made a difference because it's put, the truth, being able to capture the truth on the street into people's hands.
And another thing about George Floyd that you don't hear people talking about too much is that this was happening as the lockdown was happening. So that was the time when more people were home and had their TVs on than before. So that's partly, I think, why the impact dramatically increased, because more people were actually seeing now what they weren't watching before in real time.
And what else did they have to do except get pissed?
So, in other words, once you actually see the footage, you have more time at home to actually, look at things.
Yeah.
It has a humbling, even with people who have lighter skin. It was humbling a lot of people. Like, oh my gosh, this has been going on. You know what I mean? And what happened there is awful, because I've even heard conservative-minded pro-cop people say that hey, that was just wrong.
It was just wrong.
And
if you got any empathy at all, going back to it, if you got any empathy at all, and you watched that dude stick his leg across George Floyd's neck and leave it there for 8 minutes with his hands at the side, that's wrong.
Why would you even do that? I mean, it's like, is that what you do when you kill a deer, or when you shoot a deer and you're not sure
like
that it's dead?
Like the poor kid in Colorado, the kid that got Elijah who got strangled out by the cops, and then they hit him up with some sort of tranquilizer or something like that, and then he died. The 23-year-old kid, forget his name. I mean, and the other guy who...
There's so many examples.
There's so many examples. It's
you could make a monument for veterans. You could make a monument with all these people. Somebody actually did a virtual kind of monument thing. It's pretty shocking when you see it.
Hey, I put together a 12-minute video of that kind of things and called it "What's Wrong with..." One of the things that's wrong with America, police culture, and
but there's still going to be a lot of people that are going to come to the defense of the cops, because they're just taught that. And there's so many people that they've been brainwashed. They've been taught so many things for so many years. See, that's the thing that concerns me about.
And they don't know the inside fact.
They don't.
The IDF playbook has been used for the last 25, 30 years to train policing and police here in America. And that's a whole nother show.
That's a whole nother show. Well, one of the things that I will make one more point about that.
Sure.
One of the things I brought up with people when I hear them talk like that is, well, I'm really kind of, I think the unity will come when people really realize what happened last March with the CARES Act. Like when trillions of dollars were given to multimillionaires and billionaires of essential businesses, and it was not transparent. And like there's all this money. That's a lot of zeros, and I'm thinking like, where's my bailout?
23,000 plus per household.
And I just bring that simple thing up right out there, and then immediately it changes the course of the thinking. I think with the other person, I can tell that they're like, yeah, that makes sense. So suddenly the conversation is not about BLM or Antifa or about the cops or about it's suddenly about, oh, that's one way that we're actually all in this together. How come they got trillions of dollars? And even if you say things like, but yet we can't afford health care for everyone.
Right, yeah.
You say the more that you can spice it up, actual truth, with everything else is based on maybe truth or assumptions that are the divide and conquer tactics. But if you really talk about the CARES Act, and I said I've even said that's probably how it will bring people together eventually.
Yeah,
that's what I've said.
Yeah. It's a very valid path. When I tell somebody, hey, look, where was your $23,000? And they go, what? I said, you know what? The CARES Act, if you divide it up between the 100 million households in the United States, that would have been $23,000 for you.
At least.
You get your $1,200. And they go, really?
Yeah, people would have spent that money on paying off credit card bills. They would have maybe bought a new car.
They would have fed their kids.
Fixed
their car. They would have been able to get through. That $1,200 was a joke.
It was a huge joke. So that's why, and that's another thing too, because again, it proves the ways that the establishment.
That was the first wave.
That's just
That was just the first wave, Dan.
And they're waiting. And did you see the CNN? And this is things are getting crazy. When establishment millionaires from Fox and CNN, like Wolf Blitzer and Tucker Carlson, they may have journalism degrees, but they're basically multi-millionaire entertainers.
They're actors.
They're multi-million-dollar entertainers reading scripts. When you see those guys, for instance, in the case of CNN, it was Wolf Blitzer saying some real compassionate things to Nancy Pelosi, about the people. Like, there's people out there hurting. I've seen people begging for food. Why are you not trying to work to get some kind of stimulus for people now? And she was coming to her defense in a very lame way, in a very non-compassionate way, when Wolf Blitzer, Mr. Mainstream millionaire entertainer on CNN, is trying to say something compassionate.
And all Nancy's got is let him eat ice cream, right?
And on the other hand, on the Fox side, Tucker Carlson brings on Jimmy Dore
and Tulsi Gabbard
to do the same thing.
Yeah.
To the conservative side.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, when these people are doing that, ordinarily they're schmucks. I would never, see them as real journalists. I mean, once in a blue moon, maybe. But when they're doing that, what should that be telling you that we're not doing? And the left needs to get their act together. There's too many, we can't vote third party, blah, 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 blah. Well, that's part of the distraction. You need to get beyond
the divide and conquer.
Get beyond the system's manipulation of your brain and think for yourself, right? And yet that's easier said than done. But that's what's going to have to happen next. The left is going to have to probably organize around labor and unions and things like that to build the unions back up again. Co-ops of every single kind that you can possibly imagine that brings people together. And it's just, these kinds of creative ways are going to be what's going to have to happen, because boutique activism ain't gonna work. I mean, we saw some of that at Occupy, but the reason why Occupy was successful as much as it was is that it didn't 100% linger on that boutique, sexy activism. It did address some real hardcore issues. You know what I mean? That's why it was successful as much as it was. And the focus, of it being, of course, on we are the 99%, where's our bailout kind of thing.
Yep.
Well, we need that kind of thing now. Again, in a new form, however that's going to be. And
more than ever.
More than ever.
Because of COVID.
And I think we've got to realize the fact that we don't know what's going to happen after this election.
That's right.
And that we don't know what direction it's going to go. I don't think it's going to be good. There's going to be a really rough patch, because either way, because only two choices have been given, there's going to be mostly very unhappy people. There's already probably half the country who could vote that once again is not going to vote because they say, what's the use?
I don't know, man. It's really, the numbers are encouraging.
Well, we'll see.
Yep.
We'll see, because the Howie Hawkins is probably not going to get as many votes as Jill Stein did.
They're cheating Howie Hawkins. It goes back to election integrity.
Yeah.
If Stalin said it. Stalin said, it's enough that the people should know that there was an election. The people that cast the ballots determine nothing. The people that count the ballots determine everything.
That's right.
And that's why election integrity has to be addressed in ways that it never has. Yeah.
Well, there has
Until
to
we
be...
get that shit done, the rest of the shit just piles up.
Well, it's already piled up. Is that, if we don't focus on long-term solutions, nothing's going to get done, regardless of the electoral process. But yeah, that's I don't know. We have the solutions, but once again, getting to that point where they can be implemented, we still have to supposedly wait for the elections to happen, and then we can see where to go from there, I guess. So, yeah. I know. So. Well, and that's at least the successful manipulation of a lot of people. That's not necessarily the actual reality, but that's where a lot of people believe it is, unfortunately, which forces the rest of us to have to kind of hold off in some ways, which, so, but that was, I think that's as much as we can.
Let me just say this, okay? On Twitter, go JNN, look for Go Justice News Network, okay? And gojnn.com. Leads to my website, and Facebook, Justice News Network has a big Facebook presence, and Justice Broadcasting. So we're getting there.
Yeah, you're definitely getting there, and you're also Chaos Radio, and
Yep.
Yep.
Another partner up. So.
And of course, you can always catch the Nowman show is on the Arroyo channel. If you're in the Los Angeles area and beyond, it's AT&T UVerse on channel 99, and also on Spectrum Cable, channel 32 in Pasadena. And the broadcast week begins at 7:30 a.m. and p.m. Pacific time on Saturdays. That's broadcast week from Saturday to Friday. So the programming changes every week. That's on everyone's show, essentially. And I also grandfather in Economic Update with Richard Wolf from New York. I bicycle that in, which that airs beginning at 7 a.m. and 7 p.m. as far as the broadcast week every weekend. Also now, too, we are worldwide on Roku, Apple TV, and Fire TV, so I have no idea how many people could actually be watching this show. There's no way of really knowing, but that's pretty exciting. And also, too, on social media, it's the Nowman Show on Facebook, of course. YouTube, it's the Nowman Show on the Arroyo channel, ARROYO, the cable channel. And also the Nowman Show is the another channel that's more grassroots-y. And then Niswander is my music YouTube channel, because I've got a tribute to Jerry Lee, a song that just kind of 50s style rock and roll that I wrote, that Jerry Lee actually heard a demo of back in the 90s, and I got a tribute of that coming out very, very soon on the Niswander YouTube channel.
Oh,
because I was on America's Got Talent, so it kind of rejuvenated the musical part of my life. And so I'm continuing to do that as well and see what else is going on. So many different things. Got some great interviews in addition to this one coming up in the not too distant future as well on the Nowman show. So things are exciting. It's just a lot of issues that have to be dealt with, and I do have to
and we
say
got to make a living, right?
we got to make a living, and do want to give a shout out to the Van Halen family that obviously
Oh
lost
yeah, poor Eddie.
Eddie
Let's
recently.
let's save that for next time. Let me just close with this. Eddie used to work for me. Eddie
Yeah.
and the band, in downtown LA at Myron's Ballroom in 75, 76. And I'm
When
really
was that? Where
sorry.
is? Where was that at? Where's that
Huh?
at? Where was that ballroom
Grand and
at?
Ninth.
What is it? Grand and
Grand and
Ninth.
Ninth,
Grand and
Myron's
Ninth.
Ballroom.
Mm-hmm.
Downtown LA became the Shark Club. But yeah, we'll talk rock and roll the next time.
Yeah, exactly. That's a great subject, and of course, I'm in Pasadena, and that's where
That's
the
where they were.
that's where they were.
They
There'll be
were
an
a garage
episode,
band out of Pasadena.
and you'll see the on the Nowman show coming up. You'll see the family home soon. So not inside, but outside, of
Yeah,
course.
right, right.
But Larry, it's always great talking to you, man. It's
Thank you very much for having me, Jen.
my
Always
pleasure.
good. It's nice to see you for a change.
It's nice to see you. I know, right? I don't know when I'd be able to get up to Washington. So this is Niswander and Dan Nowman Niswander here with Larry Alger from JusticeNewsNetwork.com. And always stay present in the moment right now.
Thank you, Dan.
You're welcome.